Hi there, my name is Philip Ideson. I want to welcome you to the Art of Procurement podcast, the podcast that helps you, a forward-thinking procurement professional, position yourself and your team to proactively take advantage of the revolution that's taking place in procurement today. By interviewing industry trailblazers and sharing insights from our own experiences, my team and I pull back the curtain and shine a light on the strategies, tactics, and tools that procurement teams are using to elevate their impact. And today on the show, we have a little bit of a different podcast. I'm actually going to be interviewed by Kelly Barner to share details about the rebrand of our procurement services arm, which was previously known as Experts on Demand. We discuss some of the backstory behind our procurement services offerings, details about our expert network, and the types of delivery model we use. We've actually created one that's brand new and I hope might be a game changer for smaller and mid-sized procurement teams. It's certainly something that I would have loved to have had when I was leading smaller teams. So with that said, let's roll the tape on Kelly and I's conversation.
Hi there, I'm Kelly Barner, Head of Content and Operations at Art of Procurement, and I'm joined by my partner in crime, Philip Ideson. How are you doing today, Phil?
Hey Kelly, I'm doing good, thanks. How are you?
Good. It's actually been a long time since we've done one of these me and you podcasts.
Yeah.
We used to do these all the time.
Yeah, it's weird that, that I'm answering the questions rather than asking the questions this week.
Exactly. I know. So I've got you on the hot seat.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because we're going to talk through a lot of different things, just as much maybe about your background as about what we do today and what our continually growing and evolving vision for the overall business is. But the focus of our conversation is going to be yet another new development for the Art of Procurement community, and that is SpendPros.
Yeah.
So let me give you sort of the first opportunity. This is your baby, your vision. Just to introduce people that haven't heard us talk about this in the past. What is SpendPros?
Yeah, so I think a lot of folks will know that we have a part of our business at Art of Procurement is providing procurement services. And so what that means is, helping people or helping organizations either from a category and a sourcing perspective. So, I need some help in a specific category. I don't necessarily have access to the experts that I need. We've built this big network of subject matter experts that we've vetted over the last 5 or 6 years to help deliver on to help solve problems, provide opportunities for folks who might have those challenges within getting access to sourcing and category management expertise. And then on the other side, we've worked with a lot of different companies on helping them build learning and development programs, on training and connecting with experts in certain areas for training, but also transformation, roadmaps, capability assessments, all the kind of typical procurement services. But we've done it kind of under the radar. I think for the last 5 or 6 years, or it's all really been organizations coming to us asking for help.
Yeah.
We've then deployed our network of SMEs for, and now we felt finally, probably because now we have a little bit more bandwidth as we grow the business, now's the time for us to kind of carve that out into its own brand and then have some specific offerings, which I think are a little bit unique the way that we built them. We can talk a little bit about that in a minute, but that we have something that we can present more to our community as a way that we can help them specifically on elevating their impact beyond the content that we create.
And to your point about some amount of this coming from people approaching us looking for help or ideas or suggestions, it is one of those things that even as years rack on, right, sort of being out of the field, you never truly leave that. Like your heart stays there. And I think despite all of the things in procurement that have changed, an awful lot of things remain the same. And some of the challenges that procurement leaders and teams are facing, we faced personally when we were practitioners, when we were consultants. And so you can't be an empathetic person and not sort of feel it and want to help that somebody else is going through it. And so I think, continuing that journey is certainly an important part of this.
Yeah, I think that, as we've grown from the content side of Art of Procurement, the content side of Art of Procurement has benefited from us continuing to be helping organizations on the services side, because I think it's really easy once you step away and step out of that day-to-day job in procurement, it's easy to lose touch with the realities of what it's like on the ground and be a little bit more what's the right word? Like, you can be visionary about what procurement can be, but that might not necessarily be built in reality when there's the day-to-day challenges. So it helps you stay really grounded and helps you stay on top of what the day-to-day activities are today and day-to-day challenges are for procurement today, not what we remembered them, the years past when we left our practitioner jobs.
Absolutely. Now, you talked about the fact that SpendPros follows a unique model. And I think some of the design of that model is based on the fact that SpendPros is intended to meet a very unique and specific set of challenges and business needs. Do you want to talk a little bit around the decision to create SpendPros and then sort of the unique set of circumstances that it's designed to plug into?
Yeah, and to go back a little bit, I've been involved really heavily in procurement services and procurement outsourcing for a long time. I think I've spoken multiple times on the podcast about the time that I've spent overseas managing a captive shared service center, but also, an organization that I was with back in 2007, 2008 were one of the first to embrace outsourcing of category management and sourcing. And I led that engagement on the practitioner side. And that led me actually 4 years later to going onto the other side of the table and working for that company, which was ICG Commerce at the time, became Procurian. And then Procurian, ultimately we were bought by Accenture. And that was my last corporate kind of role before setting up Art of Procurement. So I've always seen there's this big opportunity for procurement organizations to leverage subject matter expertise, real-time market intelligence, and been really passionate about that. So when I left Accenture, a lot of people don't really know this, is that so people might see the business name for Art of Procurement as being Procure Change. Really, Procure Change was a business on its own, which was intended to help organizations figure out what's the best use of external talent versus internal. Like, how do we build this hybrid kind of delivery model and to best operationalize that? And at the time I started the podcast became a lot more successful than I ever thought, and we ended up rebranding pretty much everything around Art of Procurement. But that was the ultimate vision. So it's always been something that has been what are we, 2024 now, so probably 15 years in the making.
Yeah.
So the challenge that I would always see for mostly it's the kind of middle market procurement organizations. So you're thinking about, you have enough spend where there's an ROI for accessing subject matter expertise and market intelligence, but you're not at the size where, that means you can just go and hire an expert in every category, or that you can just go and sign, a big outsourcing or procurement services deal with one of the larger providers out there. So you kind of get stuck. And I know that expertise and market intelligence is valuable and drives an ROI. I can't really afford the ROI based on my spend under the current models. And so I end up having a generalist, and I was a generalist, so nothing against generalists. You end up having a generalist that's managing the process. And so it's really hard to get out of that tactical and process driven role to something that is really going to drive a lot more impact. And that was kind of the gap that we wanted to help fill with the network that we have access to.
Well, it's ironic because, for how many years have we had different versions of the conversation around, should subject matter expertise reside in-house? Should it come in from experts? And even the question, which subject matter expertise should reside in-house versus coming from experts? In some cases, based on what you've said about either ROI or available budget, it doesn't matter. The option is not there to pick and choose where you want to bring in expertise under traditional models.
Yeah, and I'm a huge believer for the future operating model of procurement is that, at least for those organizations that don't have the ability to hire an expert, essentially for all of their spend. And many of these organizations may hire an expert for the high value, high frequency spend. So you're buying it all the time. It's really the most strategic thing you buy. But what about that spend that is really, it has a lot of strategic value to you, but you're only in the market once every 3 years, and you don't really get the opportunity to have expertise to manage those the category management process and the sourcing process for those. So that was kind of where we kind of thinking, well, there's got to be an opportunity there. So the operating model of the future, really, that I see for those organizations is very much that the staff that are within the internal teams are delivery leaders, they're relationship builders. They're the ones who are understanding what the stakeholders really need from procurement. They're connecting procurement with the value proposition of the business. But they're then leveraging this ecosystem, and this ecosystem is of tools, technology, of expertise to help deliver that, so that you're kind of not having to do it all yourself. And so this kind of plays into that vision of what I see for being the future operating model for procurement.
Yeah. And you talked about timing. Certainly a lot of it has to do with bandwidth. Very exciting. We're having weekends and evenings now. It's like a huge moment in that entrepreneurial journey. But even outside of the business, there are some sort of mega trends going on that also make this a good time to bring something like SpendPros to market. What are some of the things that you've been watching that play towards this being a viable model in the way that we envision it now that might have not been the case 3, 4, 5 years ago?
Yeah, I think that certainly as we explain more about what SpendPros and the models is, it'll probably become a little clearer. But you think about trends like the gig economy continues to pick up pace. And it's funny, I thought 10 years ago, the gig economy would have a huge impact on procurement after the financial crisis of 08, 09, and it never really did. Organizations went from firing back to hiring. And, you now see, probably because technology from a communication and collaboration didn't exist so much that it was, and it wasn't quite so accepted, that you could really do a job anywhere in the world. And it was more about outputs as opposed to whether the green light was on in Microsoft Teams to say you were sitting at your desk. So I think as that becomes more accepted, I think there's a greater opportunity to leverage experts or leverage kind of fractional resources, if you will. And honestly, when I observe procurement, more and more and more people every day, people with so much experience in specific categories. A lot of the folks that I used to work with back when I was on the corporate side delivering these are at that point in their career where they're saying, you know what, I think I want to go independent. I'm not sure I want to be in corporate anymore. I want to take control of my own career. I want to be entrepreneurial. And so you have all this talent that's now available that didn't used to be available on a on-demand basis, which helps fuel the ability to bring all that talent together so it can be offered still under a managed service, but you're accessing this talent that previously was only available within, large consulting firms.
Yeah. So we're going to talk in a minute about sort of some of the components of the model that make this unique. But when I think about all the conversations that we've had while building this, selfishly to me, one of the most important things that makes this unique is that our way of doing things, that Art of Procurement philosophy, is truly at the heart of this. And so maybe that ends up becoming, you talk about the red thread, right? When we have these conversations, maybe that ends up being a piece of consistency that runs through this. What are some of the elements of the Art of Procurement philosophy that people should expect to see and hear and experience as they learn more about SpendPros?
Yeah, that's a great point, because really when we pre-vet experts to bring into the network, we're looking at experts and potential experts through that lens of, do they kind of embody the values that we and the ideas and ideals that we have for procurement, and that's all around ensuring that we're connecting with the greater business and you taking a big picture look. It's not necessarily about going and figuring out how we can beat up the suppliers, for 1% here and 1% there. It's bigger picture. It's collaborating and connecting with stakeholders and having stakeholders being a part of the journey. It's around how do we think around driving differentiated decision making. It's something we've talked about quite a lot. It's something we've talked about actually in the annual letter this year. And a lot of that comes down to where procurement can position themselves to actually help the business think more around like what bringing information, bringing insights, bringing data so they can make decisions they wouldn't ordinarily be able to make before, again, as opposed to just going and using power dynamics. And the other thing is, it's not necessarily about helping address every single piece of spend. I don't think that that's something that we're a big proponent in, being able to see all spend, but not necessarily action all spend. So where is it that we can make the biggest difference? and make a difference in that area of spend rather than try and address everything. But those are some of the ways, we drive we drive change, or we're always talking about challenging the status quo. So it's thinking a little bit outside the box of, you may have tried an approach to solve something within your business within a category before, but how do we kind of think a little bit differently and approach it in a different way? Those are some of the things that we're looking for in the experts that we pre-vet, again, as opposed to just, we've got a 5-step, a 6-step, 7-step process, and we're just going to religiously follow that process.
Yeah. Now let's talk a little bit more about the model itself. We've mentioned a couple of times in different ways that, this is not traditional consulting. How is the SpendPros model different from what people might typically associate with consulting services?
Yeah, so we have 2 real engagement models. One is more traditional, one is the more traditional project-based. So you have a need for a subject matter expert to address a specific topic, and that topic can be category related. It can be a sourcing project from end to end, or an initiative, to consolidate your spend. Or it can be, we need help in building a supply diversity program, or we need help doing a capability assessment. So all of those things, we do have the expertise within our network to be able to deliver and handle. Really, the new model that we put together is something called spend briefs. So spend brief is, you think about the category management and the sourcing kind of continuum. A lot of organizations, you have your generalists within the team that are already kind of sat managing that relationship. So you can manage that end-to-end process, but there's certain points along that process where having an expert in your corner, having that subject matter expertise, having somebody who can go and make recommendations, strategic recommendations based on everything they see and all their experience is super, super valuable. So it's guiding you along the way as opposed to doing all the work for you. So we created this set of briefings, and these briefings are, we talked about them being fixed input, fixed output. So what that means is they're pretty set briefings that we'll take in. We'll have an expert that, talks to our clients about understanding what the current situation is, what the need is, what some of the roadblocks may be, some of the nuances in that organization. We'll take that information, add it to some market intelligence that we have access to, add it to their own, the experts' experience to come up with a set of recommendations that they'll then help you socialize within your organization. And so you have one of those briefings at pretty much every stage gate, within that category management and sourcing process. So opportunity analysis, what suppliers should I be thinking about? How should I write the RFP or RFX if I'm going to go to market? How do I score the RFP or RFX when it's come back? And what are some negotiation strategies? The same on the contract. What are some of the negotiation strategies from the contract? And then when you're kind of contracted, then how do I make sure, do a health check to make sure that this engagement is on track and it's delivering all the things it needs to deliver? So they're really kind of targeted along that continuum, which allows us to be able to offer those at really competitive pricing compared to bringing on somebody for that whole end-to-end, as an example, because you don't necessarily need somebody to do that whole end-to-end because you've got somebody already on your team who can manage the stakeholders along the way.
But that's also, I think, where you start to see some of the procurement come out in this, right? So we thought about, not to oversimplify it, of course, we thought about, okay, what would be the spec? What do we want the ROI to be? How do we want the impact and the outcome to be measured? It is intended to be with a defined scope, so that there isn't this, I'm sure there's a perfect classic consulting joke to tell right here, and I just can't remember it. But this army of sort of people show up, and from that day forward, you will never get all of them back out of the company again. that is not the goal of this. The goal is to come in, sort of targeted, strike, do a very specific thing, and then be done.
Yeah, the other thing to add, and this goes kind of to the AOP way, if you will, is the educational component of it. Because what I see this out of, if our experts succeed, if the processes we built succeeds, it will train the client's team in what best in class approaches look like, so it's so that they don't need to come back again for another one on that category. It's actually helping them kind of understand what some of the experts and how the experts go about their thinking, what they're looking for, and how do they distill all that information. So we're looking at this as much of a if we've done our job, you don't need to go and get the next one. Whereas a lot of times with more traditional consulting, you kind of get reliant upon that. And then all of a sudden when the engagement ends, you're kind of left with nothing. And I've been there and, been on the receiving end of that a number of times in my career. And you're thinking, okay, what did I spend all that money on?
Yeah.
So that's definitely a big part for us.
And it doesn't matter when it happens in the process. Surprises are always bad.
Mhm.
Probably 5 times in all of history, there's been a good business surprise. In most cases, any surprise at any point is not a good thing. And so giving people a sense that they know what they're going to get out of it, they know what the experience will be, they know what the outcomes will be. That's an important part. We're trying to make this predictable.
Yeah. Yes. And the process, I think that we talk about, you don't want to be too what's the word, like focused on process in procurement. Like we all love a good process in procurement, but process sometimes gets us in trouble.
Yes.
But it's about, some of that process, when you think about the approach to doing something like this, helps you bring consistency.
Yeah.
And is built upon best practice. So we're trying to do that within the briefings. That doesn't necessarily mean that your category management and your sourcing process has to be very rigid, but there's some consistency within that process. So you're getting the the recommendations, the guidance, the advice, the help in your corner, as I say, that you need when you need it.
Now, when we start to think about that approach, I know because I've gotten to be a part of this, but I'm sure a lot of people are wondering at this point, does this apply to me? What categories of spend are covered by the program? We can't necessarily cover all of it, but can you give people a sense of what types of spend categories, at least at a high level, would fall into the SpendPros program?
Yeah, so we have probably at this point 75 plus experts within the program. Those experts range from independent subject matter experts to we have some consulting partners as well who are allow us and enable us to tap into their resources to be able to deliver. Now, I would say whenever we're delivering any of these programs, they're all delivered under the SpendPros banner and under the SpendPros organization. So we're not just connecting you with somebody else with another company and saying, okay, hope that goes well. Good luck.
Good
we
luck,
really believe in this expert, and let me know how it goes. We're responsible and accountable for the delivery of the services. Now, when it comes to categories, I would say the majority of typical indirect categories, so marketing, IT, logistics, MRO, corporate travel, professional services, contingent labor, all those that make up the vast majority for most organizations. Excuse me. And then there will be some very random categories that I know are unique to people's organizations. In those cases, then while we may not have an expert within the network, we do have access to a lot of talent. So we can do searches for very specific, very niche areas. Others that we have packaging as another category that we have expertise in. And on the direct materials side as well, we have both some independent consultants with direct materials experience, but also a couple of consulting partners who have, kind of a broader range of categories that they cover. But, you look at the majority, the 90% of categories that most organizations buy is where we've got the majority of our expertise.
So somebody reaches out and we do have an expert with the subject matter expertise that they're looking for. What does the engagement flow look like from there?
Yeah, so typically, we have an intake form. So you would go and complete an intake form, which essentially is just asking you about the category, identifying the category, what the need is, that you have, the subcategory. What would happen from there is once we identify the expert that will be able to support you, that expert will reach out. They'll have a introductory and kind of a discovery call with you just to go over all the key details of what your situation is, what some of the nuances are, who your suppliers are, for example, what your spend looks like, all that good stuff. This all assumes, everything's of course under NDA from a confidentiality perspective. So they'll do that discovery process with you to get the information that they can with that in that kickoff call. Then the subject matter expert, the SpendPro, will go and create the briefing documents. So the briefing documents, as I mentioned before, are pretty fixed in terms of the categories that are in there and the types of information that they're going to be collating and then reporting back to you. They're going to be taking account of market intelligence they have access to, their own, obviously, expertise and experience within the category to come back with a list of findings and recommendations. With that spend brief, so that's the document, is the brief, they'll then have another call with you to kind of go through all the different findings and to give you the recommendations, to answer any Q&A that you might have, and really to help set you up for socializing that internally. But if you need additional help past that kind of recommendation call, we do have the ability to do what we call a Spend Brief Plus, which is just buy a few extra hours with that expert so that they can come and help you socialize the recommendations within your organization if you need some extra help, or if you need your stakeholder to ask some Q&A and they weren't there at the briefing presentation call. You can then engage the next briefing along the process, or you may look and say, you know what, this is an opportunity where I think is bigger than our ability to go and deliver on ourselves. So maybe I need some extra help. And at that point, we can kind of figure out what does that look like that goes beyond what the structure of those briefings are.
Now, that's sort of a category-driven model, but procurement is involved in a lot of different types of process change and transformation work.
Yeah.
Is SpendPros set up to handle projects beyond something that's, category or sourcing project specific?
Yeah, that's a good question. And honestly, that's something we wrestle with, how to best communicate that, in all honesty, because one of the learnings I've had is you've got to be very focused on one specific deliverable that we can do and where we can help folks, so that you don't kind of get confused with, because we could go and say, you know what, we have such a broad range of experts that we can help you with anything. The reality is, yes, we help organizations with transformation-based work, with training, with doing technical roadmaps. We're doing something at the moment around where should I be thinking about using AI within my procurement tech stack. We've done things in the past with my P2P implementation was broken. Can you kind of help me at least band-aid over it so that it works until I figure out what to do next? So we've done all of the above, and there's certainly a lot of expertise within the network to do that. That's that kind of thing. That's a conversation. That's that the spend briefs are very I need this. It's very fixed, and it's a kind of you're able to turn those around pretty quickly. The other things is more, look, I've got this challenge. Is there anyone in your network that can help us? Can we solution something? Or if not, we're more than happy to direct you to others, because we certainly see all of us within this procurement community as here we all collectively want to help elevate the impact of the community that we talk to through the podcast, through all the webinars, through the digital and live events. So we'll just we're wanting to be very specific around a very specific area. If we can't help, or we think you better serve somewhere else, then we will absolutely give you some recommendations of where that might be.
Now, when you think about who's currently in the network, what are some general things that you can say about the different experts that we've had conversations with, have associated with categories or specific areas of expertise? Just like some general things to give people a sense.
Yeah. So, for example, the category specific experts are people that have spent their entire career in that category. We spoke and onboarded somebody just last week who has spent their entire career supporting logistics categories, truckload, ocean freight, small parcel, you name it. That's what they do. That's what they know. They're in the market all the time, and they have worked in some of the most prestigious consulting and procurement services organizations during the course of their career. And so that's the kind of experts that we're talking about. Now, there'll be folks who have spent more of their time as a practitioner versus a consultant. But you're talking about people with significant experience in their areas of specialization. Now, there may be some very specific, sub categories within a space that we'd come and say, look, they don't have specific experience in that very nuanced thing that you're needing to look for, but they have this other experience that they can kind of apply to
Yeah.
that. I think that one of our philosophies is under promise and over deliver. And so, it's always hard in marketing because a lot of marketing is over promising and under delivering. But there's a lot of expertise with an awful lot of experience there. And then on the transformation side, we have, really experienced chief procurement officers, as an example, who've been there, they've done it, they've built transformation programs within their organization. We've got people who procurement isn't their thing, but what they do is change management. And so they know how to drive a change in communication program if you need some support from that. And then we've got folks who are very specific in one area of specific training, sourcing training or negotiation training. So it really is a broad network, but we're looking for the folks who are the best of the best, in their field.
Now, given the fact that this whole model and the way that the processes inside of it will work is really kind of designed for what we would have liked to have had back in the day when we were in practitioner shoes, how do you think about the benefits to procurement of having access to the SpendPros model?
Yeah, I think, and I'll talk more generally just about access to expertise and access to market intelligence, because there are a number of different organizations that are both partners to ours and that we know very closely who, in circumstances have their own, engagement models that are probably more suitable for an organization who maybe have a larger size, for example, than what the SpendPros model is that we're building. Access to that subject matter expertise, when you think about it from a category and a sourcing perspective, one allows you to really position procurement as somebody who knows what they're talking about in terms of a specific category. And what I mean by that is, a lot of times stakeholders will look at procurement and think we're here to run a process, not that we're here that we have insights that they haven't thought about before. Or they may have seen these insights, they may have the same or feel they have the same insights, but they've not connected the dots in the same way that we can do, having that market intelligence and having that subject matter expertise. So I think that drives the perception of procurement, for one thing, in terms of what we can deliver. But in terms of results, it helps you kind of think big picture. Like, what are the value levers that I can drive in this category that I might not have thought about, or that running a process alone will not uncover? And the last thing I would say is that it's kind of oftentimes procurement's at the information disadvantage with our suppliers. Our suppliers know because they're selling the same thing day in, day out. And so we're kind of hoping that a process uncovers, the RFP process, for example, uncovers information that we can then use later on in the process to figure out what value looks like without really knowing. All we know is that, a bunch of providers told us at the beginning of the process that value looked like it was $10. And at the end of the process, it was $8. So look at the difference we made, when actually we should have paid $5 after all. Plus, we could have had all these other things if we'd have known to ask for them. So I think that's a big part of the expertise and the market intelligence as well.
Well, and it's interesting when you think about it in terms of access to expertise and certainly repositioning procurement within the business as a whole. Do you see any additional benefits to stakeholders? Because I'm sure with a lot of these briefings and a lot of this support, in fact, it's not just going to be procurement having contact with SpendPros. It may, in fact, be other stakeholders in the business.
Yeah.
Are there additional benefits of access to that expertise that both the business and procurement end up getting through that additional contact?
Yeah, I think that from a stakeholder perspective, it helps stakeholders think a little bit differently about the things that they're buying, or they're getting different perspectives. And while I hate to say it, because again, I was a journalist as well, sometimes they feel like it's more of a peer-to-peer discussion with someone who's been in who's bought the thing that they have also been involved in buying for years and years and years, that understands all the nuances that me as a journalist never really understood. I would always rely on my subject matter expert to help me with that. So I think that there's a big element of that, and then tying it, like the experts will typically have more understanding of how these stakeholders are driving value to the bottom line or the top line. and what some of the things are that a traditional procurement process might, and I'm always thinking about marketing, and I know we often cite this, and everybody in procurement cites marketing as being, you're working with a marketing person, you should be thinking differently about how you do procurement than if you're working from somebody who is buying, something that's very commoditized. And it's kind of knowing those, the nuances of how to position the value that you can have to that expert, to that stakeholder, that we may miss when we're not in that category or that subcategory all the time.
So I have two questions left that I want to ask. And knowing our community as I do, I have a feeling these are the two questions that everybody has been waiting to hear the answers to.
Mm-hmm.
The first one, of course, we have to ask about pricing models. So we've talked about the briefings, we've talked about additional support if people need it.
Yeah.
What does the pricing model for SpendPros look like?
Yeah, so for the spend briefs that we've talked about, it's fixed cost. So it's cost per briefing model. It'll be a higher cost for a one-off versus buying a bundle of briefings, for example, that you can then spread across multiple different categories or subcategories, or think about when you're doing your wave planning for next year and you're wanting to look for where the best opportunities are. But it's all fixed cost, is the briefings. Now, when you think more about the more project-based work, there isn't one way to answer that, because it depends on the project. It also depends on the expert and the flexibility of the expert and around their commercial models. It could be fixed cost with milestones. It can be fixed cost with some risk and reward that's built into it based on what the project is. We have folks and consulting partners within our network who are comfortable working on gain share basis. So if it's a category, for example, where they're familiar and that's one of their commercial models, and that's something that we can pass on. So it really is something that we solution on a case-by-case basis, just depending on what the project is, who the experts are, and what the preferred commercial model of our client is. Because a client may say, well, we prefer this model, this pricing model, or this commercial model. So for us, then that might be, okay, well, we'll bring in this expert or partner versus this expert or partner, because we know what their preference of commercial models is. We're really looking for where the best fit is.
Yeah. And then, of course, if people are listening to us having this conversation, it means SpendPros is live. This is not forward-looking. This is not speculative. This is happening, people. This is real. If people have listened in to us, had this conversation, found some writing or a post about it on social, what should people do in order to learn more?
Absolutely. So you can just go to spendpros.com, and spendpros.com will redirect you to a couple of pages on our website. If you want to go directly to the website, it's artofprocurement.com/spendpros. And we're really excited to get this live. As we talked about before, we've really been doing this behind the scenes for a number of years, and it's become a not immaterial part of our business at Art of Procurement. So it's exciting for us to finally put a wrapper around it, and to be kind of pushing it out to the world. And as everything with Art of Procurement, we always welcome feedback, suggestions, perspectives, and if you're an expert in a particular area of spend and would like to reach out as well and be part of our network, then we'd love to hear from you too.
Excellent. Well, thanks for letting me have a turn with the interviewers, Mike. Yes. It's always good to get to talk through these things. We are very excited about SpendPros, and hopefully we're hearing from both experts and also companies that are interested in making use of its benefits for them.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the questions, Kelly. Like I say, it's always interesting to be on the other side of a microphone. I'm not sure whether it's easier or harder. I think it depends on the questions, but I appreciate it.
Thanks, Phil.
If this episode struck a chord with you, please do send it to somebody. We grow here at Art of Procurement through word of mouth, and that would be really appreciated. You can also support us by giving us a thumbs up, a star rating, or a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Since 2015, we've built the world's largest free resource for procurement professionals looking to elevate their impact. Our resources span podcasts like this, videos, blog posts, papers, and events. To join us on the inside and to ensure you never miss an episode, a webinar, event, or a post, please do subscribe to our weekly newsletter, This Week in Procurement. You can do that at artofprocurement.com/subscribe. That's artofprocurement.com/subscribe. Thank you for joining us today, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.